Hello everybody, welcome back from the coffee break. Hope you all enjoyed a nice refreshment. Together with me today is our colleague, software architect, Dr. Jens Brun. He's been with Prodina since 2009 by now, and he's been involved in a lot of Liferay projects, including Liferay migration projects. To me, my name is Christian Breen. I'm the lead architect for Liferay solutions at Prodina, so I'm working with Liferay for over 4 years now, and been with Prodina for the last 7 years by now. So, what are we talking about? Liferay migration projects. First of all, short introduction about Prodina, what we are, where we come from. Then, what do we have to do before we can actually do our upgrade? What we have to prepare. Then, how to perform the update, what to look at, how to overcome maybe problems, and last but not least, our experiences in several projects that we've done upgrading Liferay. So, Prodina AG, privately held, situated here in Frankfurt. We are a consulting company specialized on IT consulting. Founded around 1990s, so we've been on the market nearly 20 years now, survived the crisis, has been growing ever since, and nowadays around 170 employees, 15 of them in the back office, so very little overhead there. And one specialty, we only work with permanent workers, no freelancing, as we invest a lot of effort in the education of our consultants to ensure high quality standards in our projects. So our focus mainly lies on IT consulting, covering the whole development life cycle. So from the business analysis over project management, doing the actually development down to the quality assurance and testing in the end. Our philosophy is we work a lot together with enterprise open source software because we think that's a nice way to have an easy threshold to start working with the product. We can mainly start with a free version of the product, get the first experiences, and then once it's getting ready for production, switch to a full supported enterprise version of the product. So we formed a lot of partnerships during the last years with products on the market that we think are fit for enterprise solutions. So that comes from business process modeling with Signavio, enterprise integration, enterprise service buses with Talent, BI with Jaspersoft, content management together with Alfresco, and last but not least, Liferay when it comes to enterprise portals, which mainly brings us here today. So, our topic today, Liferay migration, upgrading Liferay. So why do we need to upgrade? As a saying, never change a running system, so why not keep our installation as we established it with a lot of effort in the beginning. Well, at some point we will need new features in our system, have a need for new technology support, new third-party software that we need to integrate with, which relies on newer standards, and last but not least, the end of service life of our product has been reached. So that's basically when it comes to the need for an upgrade. So what are the situations that we basically find when we run into upgrading a new Liferay portal? Mainly, the Liferay portal installation has been running for a very long time, so there's a lot of user-generated content inside the portal, a lot of authored content, a lot of customer data, which has been evolved over the last years, and for sure a lot of custom development according to the customer's needs, so a lot of plugins, hooks, and last but not least, new styling. Quite seldomly the classic theme is used here. So what does it mean? It's very expensive to redo the work again, to reproduce all the effort that we've done here. So there's a high need to migrate our existing data to the new version. So we can basically divide this migration process into parts. One is the content inside our portal that has to be migrated to the new version. That is what I will be talking about later on. And the second part, when it comes to migrating the plugins, migrating the custom development, there I will hand over to Jens now, who will give a nice overview of how we usually approach that.
Yes, thank you, Christian. And I will be talking about development target by means of sources when facing an upgrade project. So what we have here is an ideal scenario. So the first question is, what are the reasons for development? So what different sources do we find, and what were the reasons for their development or their integration into a Liferay portal? We start with custom functionalities like your own portals to fit the needs of your business, and implement functionalities which are not provided by Liferay as built-in plugins. And it goes down to change of Liferay core itself. So this is the most complex scenario when it comes to upgrade projects. Based on these reasons for development, we have different degrees of dependency on the Liferay sources and the Liferay core itself. So when you have some custom developments, normally you have rather low dependencies on the Liferay core itself. You might have dependencies, like for example, if you make use of Liferay services, but normally you make use of clearly defined interfaces, ideally. More or higher level of dependencies is given if you implement some custom functionalities relying on, for example, startup actions or login actions, etc. So then you have a higher degree of dependencies on the Liferay core and the Liferay functionalities itself. And finally, the highest level of dependencies which you can have is if you adjusted the Liferay core itself, for example, through X or X environment in Liferay 5. So this gives you a first hint of the complexity of certain packages or targets of your upgrade project. So then I would make a few remarks on a development environment or environment for your upgrade. This is also a scenario in an ideal world. Ideally, you should have an issue tracker, but not only an issue tracker where you say, well, do this and that, but you should maintain your issue tracker following certain guidelines. For example, you should make a classification of the issues. Well, this is a custom development, or this is an extension of the Liferay core, and you should do some grouping of artifacts and aspects during your development. This is a preparation which you do during the development for your base version which you want to upgrade. Then you have your plugins SDK, normally where the original artifact types or plugin types are developed in. And you have a version control system. This is where the relevant place where you find the original sources of your projects. And you also have a history of changes over time. If you have a long-running portal which you want to migrate, then the history should clearly indicate when you did what and why. And finally, you should have a rich project documentation, for example, giving background information, and you should document dependencies on the Liferay core. So if you say I have this custom functionality and you document I depend on this and this services, this would give high value information during the upgrade project. And last but not least, most important is here dependencies between these and relationships between, for example, source codes, commits, issue tracker, and documentation. So you should, for example, refer to an issue in your issue tracking system when committing something to your version control system. So next thing, I mentioned this in the context of the issue tracker, would be ideally that you classify your artifacts or your project or your issues. For example, what we did in the context of an issue was a bug fix. So if you have a version of Liferay where you implemented a bug fix on your own before it's provided by Liferay, then in the upgrade process you could first of all check if this bug is still given in the new version or release of Liferay. If not, you might drop all aspects related to that issue. Secondly, you should highlight is is this issue or this aspect related to themes or styling. And there you have styling or theme upgrade recommendations provided by Liferay. So if you address this collection of artifacts in your repository, then you have important hints from the Liferay side, and maybe there's a new theme provided by Liferay, or you want, in combination with your upgrade project, also provide a new theme to your users. Then configuration aspects, for example, portal-X properties, etc. Here you have to check is this or are these configuration options also provided in the new release, and maybe you also need to refer to legacy properties because default values change from version to version. Yeah, then you have your custom developments, or maybe majority might be custom portlets. And here you should, as I said before, document the dependencies on Liferay core and Liferay services in your project documentations. And finally, extensions. You have to check, is the extension point still provided in the new release of Liferay? Normally it should be. And finally, you have the adjustment of Liferay core. So some recommendations from our side how to organize your version control system. This mainly relates to adjustments of the Liferay core. So you should always start with a base version of the portal sources from Liferay. That means no adjustments made in the first check-in of a certain artifact or class Java class file, etc. And then start doing your development with the changes, always referring to issues in your issue tracking system, on commits, and finally, when coming to the upgrade project to the new release, just commit a plain version of that artifact into the version control system. What you reached there for your plugins SDK is a plain version of ideally, a plain version of the new Liferay system in your version control system. So if you deploy those into your test environment, then you have at the beginning only the new release of Liferay, and then you can start your development. What this structure gives you is some very important information or hints during upgrading certain artifacts. For example, what did we do over time? So our changes and the diffs, and in which context did what aspect come into certain source file. Then, in relation to the issue tracking system, which changes belong together? So which changes relate to the same issue? Then what is the difference between our latest version in our system in relation to the base version provided by the original release of Liferay being in production? Then what is the difference between our last change and the new version? And finally, what did Liferay between two releases in relation also to that source? So, and this is enhanced by background information in your project documentation. So then you can start your development in the context of your preparing the upgrade project based on the environment, including all these different systems and ideally the structure in your version control system. You should first of all freeze development on the base system, if this can be reached. Because if you start development, adjust something for the new release, and then have to implement something in for your base system, then you have to do your work again. Afterwards, establish your development infrastructure as described before. For example, integrate the new artifacts from the new release, etc. Then specify migration packages that might relate to, okay, these aspects belong to a custom development for the base system. These should be put into a migration package. Then you can classify that and have certain targets or building blocks for your upgrade process or project. Then establish your development and test environments and start with a an upgrade of generic or cross-cutting features, which will be the foundation for other packages during your upgrade process. Then it's most important to define certain acceptance test groups, especially when you have custom development, and you should always ensure that these are tested again by certain representatives who can say, oh, okay, this can be put into the new release or can be used after upgrading. And then start your iterative migration of the remaining packages, do the implementation and the adjustments, and perform acceptance testing based on the groups you defined. You should also include the results from migrating the generic or cross-cutting features. And if you're done with that and the different packages were all accepted, then you can start with defining your upgrade process, also referring to data migration or data upgrade. And then I want to hand over to Christian again.
Thanks. Yeah, once you've done all the homework, upgraded all the plugins, we are basically ready to go for an update. So the question is, what brings Liferay with it that helps us upgrading the data? Well, Liferay features fully auto detection of the upgrade process nowadays. So basically, if you run your Liferay against an old data, it will recognize it and upgrade all the data to the new version. Mostly. So sometimes it has to be configured in the portal X properties, especially when you run some special upgrade passes. If you look at the customer portal at Liferay, you will find mainly that's an upgrade chart, which gives you a nice overview of which upgrade processes are supported by Liferay and which upgrade passes are supported by Liferay. Mainly, there's a recommendation from Liferay which tells you, well, always upgrade from one major release to the next, so upgrade should be done step by step. That brings us to the point before we can do the update. We also have to collect all the necessary bundles. So if I want to upgrade from version 5.1, I need the last from 5.2, 6.0, and 6.120 today. Get the licenses so that we can actually have a look at the data that we've migrated. And for sure, establish a separate test environment if we don't want to try our migration on production data first. But what we do need is production-like data export, so we can see whether not just the migration process of Liferay works perfectly, but whether it applies to our data as well. And what we do need, especially when it comes to some problems, is debugging possibility. So make sure that you can connect to your Liferay via remote debugging and have a look inside there. For sure, you need access to the database, or at least the DBA who can roll back your database once something went wrong. So if you've got everything together, go into the upgrade. First thing to do, read documentation. That's the first nice step. Liferay gives you a lot of information as part of the user guide how to upgrade from one version to the next. And there's a lot of information in the Liferay wiki found, which gives you version-specific information how to upgrade and accord to some specialities here. So how to do the upgrade? First of all, comes down, uninstall all the plugins, shut down the server, and back up the database and the file system if you've got your document library data inside the file system. Right? Install a new bundle and connect it to the old database, connect it to the old document library directory. Configure the upgrade process. That is mainly needed if you go for a non-standard upgrade process. There is one in the upgrade chart that's done automatically. If you're coming from a different version, you need to configure it manually here in the Portal X properties. Then, as already mentioned, review the portal properties for incompatibilities or mainly new default values in a new version. Liferay brings a lot of legacy properties here which help you identify the changes between the several releases. And in the end, just start the portal server, see what's happening, upgrade process will start fully automatically. So during the upgrade, for sure, closely watch the log files. We want to know whether something went wrong or whether everything went right. So in case an error happens, and sometimes it does, First rule, always rollback database and file system again. Never continue from a version from a situation where the upgrade process failed at some point. So once you've rolled back, connect to your Liferay via remote debugging to have a better look inside what actually caused the error. And then do the update again, analyze the problem. Mainly it comes down to some inconsistency in the data, some incompatibilities in the data that had been collected over the years. So for instance, there are some more restrictive rules in the new releases that haven't been any problems to former versions. One example would be the roles of security roles. If you've got a leading space in there, the whole upgrade process breaks at some point. If the update in the end runs perfectly, after each step, for sure, do a backup of the database of the file system. We don't want to do it again. Review the portal data, that's why we need a license, have a look inside, at least a little rocky shake, see whether everything is consistent and existing in our portal. And last but not least, continue with the next step once we are going an upgrade for a longer path. So next release. In the end, always think of migrating the permission algorithm. Life has changed a lot from version 3, 4, 5, 6 to now. Especially as version Liferay 6.1 has no support at all anymore for older permission algorithms. So you need to change, need to migrate to version 6 of permission algorithm beforehand. So it brings us basically to some projects that we've done in the past and the problems or, well, also successes that we encountered here. First would be the upgrade of one of our bigger customers, VW, the Volkswagen Classic portal. It's been migration from the 6.05 Community Edition to the 6.0 Enterprise Edition Service Pack 2. Problem here was mainly not the Liferay, but the storage of the data via Jackrabbit. The Liferay upgrade process, of course, only accounts to Liferay stored in a Liferay database. It doesn't account for data that's been in several other frameworks stored. So, solution here: use Liferay, migrate your data in a file system so it is in the hands of Liferay, do the upgrade, and then put it back into Jackrabbit again, and you're ready to go. Web content and data always migrated without a problem here, which was quite nice. The only minor changes that we've done is adapting the API. There's been some changes from 6.05 to 6.12, especially for the user local service. The theme went quite smoothly, so we basically built it with a new version support in plug-and package properties, and it ran without any problems. Next scenario, same customer, different project, was an upgrade from 5.3 to 6.05. Again, data migration went really smooth and without any problem. Most effort had to be done in the migration of the custom development, so the portlets, hooks, and X environment. There were a lot of changed JSPs, which, as you can probably imagine from what Jens told you, is a big effort to migrate to the new version. Especially from version 5 to 6, we've got a new Alloy UI, which gives you a lot of changes in the JSPs, which you have to take into account. And when it comes to the use of the services, we've got a new service context, which has been introduced with Liferay 5 or constantly evolved in Liferay 6, which you will basically find in every service nowadays. The theme at that point has been rebuilt from scratch, which was mainly due to new requirements to the styling. So, next updates, just been done last week. A big customer in Düsseldorf was an upgrade from 5.17 to 6.1, last version Service Pack 2, so quite a long path. Well, if you have a look in the version 6.1, you will still find all the upgrade process classes from the former versions. So you might want to think, well, let's try a direct upgrade. Maybe it works. Unfortunately, it doesn't. One of the problems was, of course, the permission algorithm. As we don't have support in version 6.1 for the old permission algorithm, we also don't have support for migrating the permission algorithm to the new one in version 6. So back to the recommendation, do your upgrade step by step. Meant going from 5.17 via 5.2, 6.0 to 6.1. You don't have to do all the versions in each release. The last version of each release is fit enough. Data migration, when using that path, went really smoothly. No problems at all. Most effort had been done here, again, in the migration of the custom developed LDAP connector in the X environment. As there's been new theme, or need for a new theme at that point, again, migration was not needed here. So last but not least, upgrade from 5.14 to 6.0. One specialty here, you do have to migrate from 5.14 first to a version in 5.1, 5.18 or 5.17. So meaning a version where an upgrade path to 6.0 exists, to 5.2 exists, and then further on to 6.0. So before upgrading, verify that your last version of the portal really supports the upgrade path. Looking at the chart will help you there. Upgrade from 5.3 to 5.9. Again, direct upgrade, no problem. Most effort here was again doing in migrating all the X plugins. So it's been quite a big project in the end. It's been over 60 days because we had a lot of changes here in the X environment. So what recommendations can we take from that? Well, first of all, what we've learned applies basically to every software development. Make sure you've got a nice issue tracking system in place, which gives you an overview of what you've done and why you've done it. And make sure when you commit, reference these issues so you know always where you've done it as well. Next, when changing Liferay files, always make sure to commit the original one first, to be able to see the difference later on, what we've changed in our process, what we've adapted to the new situation here. And one big rule, never ever use source code auto-formatting, because it will not help you finding the differences between the original and your version. It helps as well to highlight the parts that you've changed inside the code. So you got more technical detail or more technical information in here why you've done the change in the code in that place. So make sure to document a bit more. And for sure, it's good to have a documentation aside all your software development, which gives you a nice overview of the dependencies. Dependencies between your own plugins, dependencies to Liferay services. So we don't go an explorative way to look for our dependencies in the code again. Use the web content as much as possible. Why that? Well, what we've seen is data migration always went quite easily. So if you are able to build your custom plugin, or not just say custom plugin, but your custom view in web content, hint would here be application rapid development with velocity, try to go that way. It eases your upgrade later on. And as we've heard, most effort will go into what we've changed in X environment, or X plugin, or as well in the hooks. So whenever there's need for new features or new behavior of Liferay, really question yourself whether it's necessary or whether there isn't a possibility to stick to the standard here. It will ease your upgrade a lot later on and save you a lot of money there. Last but not least, stick to the path, something which we've learned as well. You find a lot of upgrade classes inside Liferay. Nevertheless, even if it's a bit more effort, do the way, step by step, use one major release after the next for upgrading. Eases the upgrade in the end. So, come to an end, right in time, I hope. So thank you for your attention, and I hope we have some valuable information for you as well. Thanks.
have any questions, now is the time to ask. I think the gentleman raised first. Please.
Hi, so how much it took for you to upgrade in all those case scenarios?
Well, it was highly depending on the scenario. Some upgrades were basically done in a day, especially if there hadn't been a lot of X environment. Some upgrades needed effort of 60 days ahead just to migrate all the plugins and the hooks. So it's mainly depending on the situation that you find. If you've done a lot of modifications to Liferay, if you've done a lot of hooking, a lot of X environment, it will be a hassle, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a very small question. I did not really understand, did you recommend to use auto format or to avoid it?
To avoid it, for sure.
Why? I use it and it's very beautiful.
Yes, it's nice for your own development. It was a special account to, once you migrate or once you change Liferay files, if you hook Liferay JSPs or if you change Liferay core classes in the X environment, you should not use auto-formatting because it will give you a lot more problems finding your actually work that you've done to the original classes because you reformat the whole class so you don't see your changes anymore. That's why when it comes to hooks and X environment, never use auto-formatting. Just change the bits that you like to have changed, leave the rest as it is.
Okay, thanks. This is interesting.
Bless you.
Well, in this same subject, in Liferay, we used to comment when we start to make changes in hooks or EXT environments. When we change, for example, a JSP page, we start a comment. Okay, here starts the changes, and here ends the changes.
Yeah.
So you can use source formatting, but you are tagging when start and when ends the modification.
Yeah, this is the thing which when you identify the places in the source code which you changed, then you can use the start, modification starts here and modification start ends here. But it also has to do with comparing base version of Liferay and the new release. So hopefully if you do source code formatting, then it works the same way and you have the same structure and your version control system or the other tools for making the diff will identify, okay, at this place Liferay did some changes. But ideally, you take the originals and in between in your changes also stick to that formatting of Liferay and only in the section where you did your modification.
Got it.
What strategy do you use when you update your version control from one major release to the next?
Strategy? Well, first of all, we have to have a look what's existing at the customer. So do we have a lot of modifications here? Do we have a lot of plugins that have been developed by the customer itself? So basically, first of all, collect all information that you can get and then decide what to do. At some point, it's mainly divide the part really in two different groups. One is taking care about the data migration, and in parallel, the other group is taking care of the plugin migration. So in the end, once we've found a path where we can migrate our data quite easily, we've got all the plugins ready and can then go for the update. So it always depends a bit on the effort that we have to do here. If we really have an X environment with 80, 100 classes that had been changed, it's for sure a bigger project which needs a bigger setup as well. So it's been the one that basically Jens has been talking about. Run for 50, 60 days. So you need all the processes aside which you need for such a longer project there. So it mainly depends on the situation. Sometimes you can just go in, do the upgrade in a day and go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other? Please, a quick one.
Thank you for the presentation. I wonder what is in your experience, kind of how many versions between migrations by the experience, by real life experience. So do we want to certainly do the major version upgrade, that is for sure, or it is kind of also good to go more gradually between migrate smaller versions. So what would be safer?
It's a bit conflicting requirement here. At one hand, as I said, you've got the rule never change running systems. So once you've got a version running which basically covers all your requirements, and if you've done all your development on that version, then it's mainly running for quite a long while, because you won't get a lot of money from the business to upgrade your Liferay installation regularly. Updating minor versions can also be quite might also need quite a lot of effort, especially again when you've done a lot of modifications to the Liferay, done a lot of modifications in the X environment. Then each migration, even from minor version, takes a lot of effort to adopt these changes to the new version again, because you handled here with internal classes of Liferay, so they also change from minor to minor version. So if you've got a portal which is basically in its original form and uses only original plugins, then there's probably the best practice here to keep up to date and use newer version of the Liferay portal once it's available. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Our time for questions is up.
Thanks for your attention. Well, we do welcome you to come over to our information desk. We've got one in the keynote hall, and another one with a nice coffee machine aside, right in our VIP lounge over there. So if you've got any more questions, need any more information, we're happy to welcome you there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.